Okay, this just got released. 20%. What about, this is where we actually talk about burping cows, right?
Yeah, burping and farting cows we usually talk about.
But I know that it's more about the burping than the farting.
If you take cement, for example, just cement as a raw material is not that carbon intensive, but we use it in so massive amounts. So just to put it in perspective, it's the second largest consumable after water, which is, I had no idea. It would be very hard to switch that out, which means that we need to increase the production amount of hydrogen or other e-fuels that could subsidize for the heavy-duty traffic.
There is a lot of talk about the green transition, but what does it mean and how far have we come?
In this episode, we will look at the big picture. How much of our emissions come from what activities?
And are we moving the needle in order to reach all of those climate goals? This is a conversation I look forward to because often when you talk about climate, you go into details. But what we will try to do here today is to try to look at the sum of it all.
Yeah, I agree. And I think usually on this podcast, we always have expert guests. But today, we will actually try to summarize and look at it from our perspective, from yours and mine, Kristina. And I think that's going to be really interesting.
We are experts, right? In some matters.
In some areas. But
one person that is an expert is actually Bill Gates. And he has an organization that invests in climate innovation. And they have written a massive report called The State of the Transition.
Yes.
133 pages with vast information of where we are right now. And this is what we are going to discuss today, right?
Yes. So have you read it?
I have. Each and every page of it, actually. Have you?
I have. I think that's actually my copy.
With your notes then?
With my notes.
That's good.
Yeah.
Then we're smarter together.
Yeah. But I think also just to highlight, so Bill Gates' organization, Breakthrough Energy, is the one that gives out this report. And Breakthrough Energy Venture is an organization that was founded by Bill Gates back in 2015. And they have three different areas. They look at very early research, they look at innovative companies, but they also look at how to deploy that technology large scale. Because if we're going to solve these issues, it needs to be large scale.
And as you said, he wants to solve these issues with the company and partly with this report. But the report starts in the state of the world right now.
Yes.
So let's start by talking about where do these emissions actually come from? And he actually makes sure to describe it in a really easy way. He's talking about the 5 big challenges.
Yes.
Let's go through them one by one and see what they are and what they're actually emitting.
Yeah, so the first one is pretty self-explanatory. That's generating electricity. And that stands for approximately 29% of all the greenhouse gas emissions.
Correct. What about the second?
So the second is building things, which is a little bit more vague, but it includes everything from cement to steel to all of the manufacturing processes. And this one is on par with generating electricity. And I don't think that many people realizes that, but that's also 29% of the greenhouse gas emissions. And just adding on that, so if you take cement, for example, just cement as a raw material is not that carbon intensive. But we use it in so massive amounts. So just to put it in perspective, it's the second largest consumable after water, which is, I had no idea.
Me neither. And it was also interesting to see how it divides between what we actually use it and the consequences of it, but also the production of it, the manufacturing of the goods that we're using.
Yeah.
Interesting. What about the third one?
So the third one is growing food and agriculture, and that stands for approximately 20% of greenhouse gas emissions.
20%. What about, this is where we actually talk about burping cows, right?
Yeah, burping and farting cows we usually talk about.
But I know that it's more about the burping than the farting.
Yeah, good. So you actually read the report?
I did.
Good. That's very good, Kristina. So the fourth one, that's transportation. How much does that stand for?
It stands for 15% of the emissions today.
Yeah, it does. And I think interesting here is that, even though we're moving quickly in the EV space, then, we still have to figure out how to solve the transportation for big ships and for airplanes and things like that. And this is also discussed in this report. But it stands for 15%, that's right.
And the last 7% are?
Those are from keeping buildings warm and cool. Especially with the global warming now and everything getting warmer, the need and demand for cooling and AC devices are rising rapidly.
Together, these stand for 100% of the emissions today. Let's take them from the beginning. So number 1 is?
Generating electricity, 29%.
Number 2?
Building things, 29%.
Number 3?
Growing food, 20%.
Number 4?
Transportation, 15%.
And last but not least?
Keeping buildings warm and cool, 7%.
And the interesting thing about this report, as it is that they have done a state of the situation in each of these areas where they look into what can be done, what are the key aspects that we need to move forward on, but also educating us on each and every level. But he actually talks about a couple of things that are general for all of this. And there is one word that stands out. It's the first thing you read when you open this. And what is that?
That's innovation.
That's correct. You got it. 1 point, Alex.
Thank you.
Awesome. You did your own work. Thank you for that. Can you elaborate a little bit? What does Bill Gates actually mean in the foreword? And what does he talk about in the foreword?
No, but I think one important aspect also by categorizing this in generating electricity, building things, etc., is to see that it's actually, these 5 driving forces of greenhouse gas emissions. So if you understand that, then you can also start to look at how can we affect that. So I think it's done in a very smart way and a way that allows people to understand where those greenhouse gas emissions come from. So it starts in a very good way. Then he looks at individually these things, what can be done to move this transition faster. And I think one aspect that a lot of people think about is that we need to electrify everything. We need to go to have green electricity generation, but there's also so many other things that we need to innovate within. So we cannot only electrify things. We need to work on all the other ones as well in order to get the full picture.
And isn't it also so that even if we use everything we have right now, the world is actually changing. And in order to meet the needs of the future of the world, we're going to be more people and more cows. And how are we going to meet that need, actually?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
to do that, we need that innovation in order to succeed.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I know there is no silver bullet, and they write it in this report as well. But they actually have a couple of things, or they post it down to 3 things that can actually be short-term solutions.
Well, I wouldn't put it as short-term solutions, but it's 3 points that are very on most governments and most companies' agenda right now, and that could act as a silver bullet. And that would be hydrogen as the first one, because hydrogen have the potential to store large quantities of energy, and it could also be a way to replace fuels, for example, in large-scale shipping or jet fuel. So hydrogen could be a silver bullet. However, today it's way too expensive to produce, so it cannot compete with other fossil fuels. The second one is carbon removal, because even if we would have a net zero or reach a net zero today, we would still have to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, because what we do today will be stored in the atmosphere several hundred years from now. So
many people think that this is the perfect solution. They can continue as they do, and then they can just pull it out from...
Yeah, but there's no... And that's also very clear in this report, that there are no technologies today. You have the technology to remove it, but they are not very efficient, they are very expensive, and even if they would go down, we still have to work on all the other parts in order to reach a net zero, and then continue to, even though we reach net zero, continue to pull CO2 out from the air. So it doesn't work as a replacement. You have to work on energy efficiency, you have to work on all of these other 5 activities, and then carbon removal.
Thank you for clarifying that. And what about the third one?
So the third one is the grid system. The grid system globally in most countries are ancient. Like we're talking plus 40 years. It needs to be significantly updated. And here that's massive infrastructure investments that includes a lot of permitting and will take a lot of time. So how can we speed that up? So the three key things, hydrogen, carbon removal, and the grid will be vital in order to move the transition faster forward.
And that's the three high-level ones, right? But the report actually dives into each and every part of these challenges. And I was hoping that we could go through each and every one of them on a high level, and to summarize a little bit about the three things from each part that is actually crucial to solve and to move on.
Yeah.
Then definitely, I mean, we do encourage everybody to read this report as Breakthrough Energy Ventures have done. And it's online, so everybody can download it and free to read and use. It's a lot of great knowledge.
You don't need to be an energy nerd in order to get interested, because it's actually written so that it's very understandable, even if you're not an engineer.
Actually, it is based on Bill Gates' book, How to Avoid Climate Disaster, where he demystifies and talks about the situation we are at today. So this is a extended version of what he's already written. So definitely I recommend you to download it and read it. So with that said, let's dive into the first challenge. So let's dive into the electricity challenge.
Yes.
I love the saying they have in this report, if you only have brain space for three things, what would they be? So if we look into this, electricity, what would you say? What are the three?
Well, the three they talk about in the report are that we need to triple the electricity generation going forward. We need a steady baseload power, and we need a functioning grid system in order to transport electricity from one point to another.
Number one, check. What's number two?
Baseload power.
I like that word.
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
So baseload power is that we need to have a steady supply of green electricity at all times. And it needs to be available even if the sun is not shining or the wind is not blowing.
And last but not least, if we have all of these things, there is still one thing that is stopping us, and that is?
That's a huge issue, and that's the grid system. The grid system today is ancient. It's, if you take Europe, most of the grid system is plus 40 years. And it needs to be much more flexible in order to handle all of the renewable energy, but also, the increasing demand for electricity.
So I love the phrase, without transmission, no transition. Good one. So there's a vast chapter, there's a lot of knowledge, but what is it that you can't let go of in this first chapter of electricity?
No, but I think, just to put it in perspective, 8,000 gigawatts is what we use on a yearly basis today. We need to reach to 24,000 in order to electrify everything and with the increasing demand. So, what I can think about, how will we get there and how will we reach that point? And just looking at those 8,000, 40% of those are today from fossil-free energy, but that's include nuclear energy. So, I think for the first point, how will we manage that? And I think one of the key things that they lift up in the report is, we will have to have good storage solutions, and this will be a lot of different things. It could be hydrogen, for example, but it could also be other forms of batteries. We have on this podcast have another very interesting dialogue, how can EV cars be part of the system and those batteries stabilize the grid, for example. So I think that's storage is going to be key to triple the output.
I agree with you. From my perspective, what I couldn't let go of when I read the report is the actual problem of the grid.
Yeah.
And I love this example that they have, that IRA, which is the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a really good program to make the transition come true in USA. But the interesting thing is that with the system we have today, the grid in US, 80% of those initiatives won't be able to come true because we don't have the grid that can help us to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that many people don't realize, that we can invent a lot of things, but we really need to incentivize and make sure that we get all the electricity where it needs to go.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think another important point in this is that the technology in the grid system to transport electricity, that's there, but it's massive investments and very long permitting time. So how can we speed that up? And here the governments, both on the national level and local, will play a huge part. It took up an example, to building a grid line in the United States. The permitting process took 18 years, and we just don't have that time.
We just don't have that time. Electrify everything is the thing that they say here, and find the storage, but also to find the way of making sure it ends up where it needs to be. Yeah. We don't have time to wait. Yeah. So innovate.
Innovate.
Let's move into the second challenge. So manufacturing, which is 29% of the global greenhouse gas emissions today. What are the 3 things we need to remember from this chapter?
Well, I think it's harder to bring out the CO2 from the actual manufacturing process, but they talk about 3 things that are key, and that's decarb the process, increase the recycling, and then you have to incentivize. So just if we go into it, if you take steel and cement, for example, they stand alone for 10% of these greenhouse gas emissions. As I said before, these materials as such are not that carbon intensive, which means that we need to look at the process. How can we make the process much cleaner? And one way is by electrifying the melters for steel, for example. It's to use different additives when you make cement, but this is how you can improve and decarb the process. Then the second one, how do we increase the recycling? Well, 24% of all the steel today are used from recycled, but if we can pump that up, that takes out a lot of the CO2 from the process in itself. So we need to increase the recycling of steel in particularly.
For me, things I couldn't let go of in this chapter is that many people don't understand how big of an impact steel and cement actually have. It's very easy to talk about flight shame or other kind of shames, but we're actually talking about something that we're using everywhere around us, right?
Yeah. No, and just the fact that cement is the second most consumed material globally is quite astonishing.
But I also think that it was quite interesting because there are a lot of innovation coming in this challenge, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of innovation, a lot of very cool companies that work on this, and especially to add or take out the carbon intensive parts when you produce this material or when you make the steel, for example. Just in Sweden, we have 2 companies working with carbon-free steel, which I think is quite cool, and that shows the progress. But I want to highlight also the third thing that they take up here, which is to incentivize, because they discuss on when you procure big bridges or big skyscrapers, when the architects and the designers, and when they do this, they use the standards that are available today. And when you have a standard that is approved and that affects everything from how you do things and how you build it, if you're going to move that to a new material that haven't been tested, then you need to make sure that you have the right incentives, you have the right standards. You need to incentivize the one to use greener material instead of just going with they've always been used to. So that's going to be a challenge, but it's going to be very important in order to shift the focus away from old type of carbon intensive materials to less carbon intense.
It's a huge behavioral change
exactly.
we need to do on the people who are doing the procurement, but also on the people who used to say yes or no to this actual project, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Interesting. I think it is time to move on to the third chapter. Agriculture, which stands for 20% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And we're going to talk about cows. but we're also going to talk about other things.
Burping cows.
Burping cows and farting cows.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, that is a fun subject. But if you would pick out 3 subjects that would be most interesting to take with you from this chapter, what would that be?
The first one would be the fertilizer. Second one is how we raise our livestock. And the third one, how we reduce food waste.
Good summary. If there would be some mentions of things you can't let go of in this chapter, what would be the thing? Mine is definitely there will be 500 million more cows very soon, which is crazy. But yeah,
no,
others?
It also creates a vicious circle, right? Because if you need 500 million cows, you need a lot more land, you need a lot more that land, how will you use that and where will that land come from? And will you have to deforest in order to get that land? So, it creates this vicious circle. We need more cows, or we need more space to grow crops. That will take up more land, that causes deforestation, etc. So, how do we stop this, or how do we make it more efficient? Because I don't think that saying to everyone to just stop eating meat will actually do the trick.
We've already tried that, and the report says that we've already tried it. We need to find other ways as it is as well.
Yeah.
I still remember it says, like parents told you when you were younger, you are what you eat, but it actually involves the whole planet.
Yeah.
The planet becomes what we are eating.
Yeah.
So we need to find better ways in order to produce what we are actually eating. And here they're doing, for me, which was revolutionary, is that they're doing some pretty interesting things with crops and how you grow it, but also with livestock, of course. We're talking about vaccines that can lower the methane. We're talking about different kind of foods. There is a lot of things that is going on. Was there something that you actually remember as a good example?
No, but I think the vaccines is pretty astonishing. You add additives to the food that the cows or the livestock eat, and then that actually reduces the methane emissions with up to 80%. So that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
And when it comes to the fertilizer, I don't think I didn't realize how much fertilizers that are actually used globally. But it's massive numbers, and most of it is made from nitrogen. So in that space, there's huge room for innovation. Or I would say in all of these, there's huge room for innovation. And the report also talks about that this area, even though it stands for 20% of all the greenhouse gas emissions, needs massive investments into R&D.
Exactly. So the big thing that they actually mentioned in this chapter is actually the lack of R&D and the difference in the R&D, because there are some countries that are putting more R&D into this area and others that actually don't put enough into it. So generally, this is an area where we need to progress.
Yes, we need to progress a lot.
Another area that actually has had a lot of progress is transportation, but it still stands for 15% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. Let's move into those 3 bullets.
Yes, let's do that. And I think electrical vehicles have had a tremendous progress. And there's reports saying that in the US, by some 2035, some 50% of all the cars sold could be electrified. I think the second part that is mentioned here is minerals, and that the minerals are in jeopardy. Where will we get the minerals for all the batteries that will go into all of these AVs? So that's the second part. But then the third one, which I think is the most challenging, how do we solve long distance and heavy duty transportation?
And this one actually made me have a bit of a stomach ache when it comes to the minerals and what we need in order for these batteries. I mean, there is a geopolitical issue in the world.
It is.
A lot of these minerals are mined in countries where we don't have democracy.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you're right about that, and I think that is a critical component. However, it also leads to innovation, because what you see when you can't have second sources of these minerals is that companies and researchers look into how can we change out these materials for other ones. And I think so in that way we can actually drive that transition. We still need to work on how can we mine these minerals in other locations, but it also leads to innovation, which they also discuss in this report, which I think is quite fascinating, because then we can broaden the landscape of the different minerals that you can use, and by that you can probably lower the cost. You can have second sources of supply. So it's troublesome, but it also leads to innovation.
And for me, I hope that we will continue to work to have a world where people can actually collaborate.
Yes.
Yes. One subject that stood out to me is, there is a consumer part, but there is also a heavy traffic part here. Planes, boats, and...
the heavy-duty transportation. Yeah, let's dig into that, because I think that one is a key. And now they're doing tests of hydrogen planes or electrified planes, but still the production of hydrogen is still too expensive. So what they're discussing here is, we need to see massive investments into green hydrogen in order to drop that cost. Because I think there was one reference to that, if you would replace heavy fuel oil that you have in tankers, for example, or big ships, the cost for green hydrogen is 5 times as much. So right now, it would be very hard to switch that out, which means that we need to increase the production amount of hydrogen or other e-fuels that could subsidize for the heavy-duty traffic.
And do you remember what the report said about what they need to do about it and what they're doing?
Please tell me, Kristina.
We need better policy in order to incentivize to make the right decisions in this area.
Very good.
Good. We covered that one. We have one more to go, and this one is actually pretty exciting. We're talking about buildings. And buildings stand for 7% of the global greenhouse emissions today.
Yes.
And this is definitely something we can do in our homes and in our houses, right?
Yes.
Let's dive into the 3 things that we need to remember from this chapter.
Yeah. So the first one is that buildings, they last a long time. They emit CO2 throughout the span of their life, and it takes a lot of energy to keep them warm and cool.
Number 2.
Yes, number 2 is cooling. The demand for cooling is rising with global warming, and we will continue to rise.
And the third one?
The third one is really about efficiency. We need to be much more efficient in how we run and operate our buildings.
I got stuck in this chapter when it says, like, in Europe, for example, 10% of the buildings are renovated every year, but only 1% of those renovations have a positive impact on the building's energy usage. We are not utilizing what we have.
No.
We're just letting things go up in air.
Yeah, we do.
And money as well.
Yeah, a lot of money.
The second thing that dawned on me is the innovation we need for the cooling. We're talking a lot about heating, but cooling is actually the subject we need to focus on.
Yeah, and I think I think we need to focus on both. But both cooling and heating can be decarbonized quite quickly. The technology is already there. Like the AC units that we use, they run on electricity. So if we have green electricity running on those, that's fine. The same, if you look at heating systems, most of those, they still run on fossil fuels. But you can, with heat pumps and transfer that to heat pumps, have the same. If you have green electricity running your heat pump, you can decarbonize that. So a lot of the technologies are already deployed at a massive scale in different countries. We just need to scale them up into all different countries. And I thought that was a key part in this section, that here we have the technologies, we just need to scale them up, and we need to make sure that we have the green electricity to power it.
And I'm a bit biased here, but of course it's spelled geothermal, if I didn't do that before. Anyway,
it is.
Last but not least, and this is something that when we talk about geothermal, actually have a problem with, like the behavioral changes that needs to be done when people are making conscious choices when it comes to this.
Yeah, no, and we need to be much more energy efficient. I mean, we need to focus on energy efficiency, and this is not only us as person. This is governments, it's local municipalities, it's companies. So we can all here play a big part in reducing these 7%. And it's very clear because it's things that we do today and that we have in the buildings. What heating system do we have? If it's heated by oil, well then we should replace that to a heat pump instead. If we're running our AC, make sure you look at where does that electricity come from. Is it green or does it come from a coal-fired plant, for example?
So making smarter choices, but also the incentivizing part from governments and companies in order to be able to invest in these better choices that are.
Exactly.
Right. So there is a lot of things to be said and done about this report. We've gone through the 5 big challenges now. Try to summarize. I mean, there could be one episode per challenge if you would like to.
Yes.
But just like an overview, if you would summarize and step back one thing, like what do you take with you from this report? Like read it, going into it and understanding it. What are your biggest takeaways?
I would say positivism. I think it highlights all the issues that we have in a very clear way, but that also makes it easier to break it down and see, how can we work on the solutions. So I'm very happy with this report because it helps me to be positive about the future and seeing, here are things that we can work on that will actually make a difference.
I agree with that. And I would like to add that I think that there is a methodology behind this as well, that they are presenting in this report, which comforts me.
Yeah.
They're talking about the discovery, and they're talking about development and deployment, like in 3 steps. And this is what we need to do in each and every area where we are at.
Yeah.
And they're also emphasizing that the discovery might not be in the lab where you think it is. No. Actually, it can be around the corner in a garage or somewhere else. I mean, Microsoft wasn't invented in a lab or...
No, that was Paul Allen and Bill Gates in a garage.
Exactly. And I think that what they're showing here is that there are a lot of innovations out there just around the corner that we just need to trust in.
Yeah, we need to discover them.
We need to discover them, but then when we discover them, we need to help them to grow.
Yes.
We need to do the development together with them. And I think that that is something that I urge investors and governments out there to help companies that have those innovations to push them along the way, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you are a great company builder if you are a great inventor.
No.
So we need to help all these people out there because I believe that the solutions are out there.
Yeah.
We just need help to come into a situation where we can actually deploy them.
Yeah, and I think the last part also with deployment, because when you made the discovery, when you started and piloted, and you have a working commercial pilot, how do you scale that up on a global level? And that's the third part of it. So, taking it from discovery up until a global deployment.
And I think that we can summarize with that said.
Awesome.
Awesome. This report is awesome and we urge you to read it, share it.
Yes.
If you don't want to read it and you want someone else to learn about it, then of course it's super easy just to share this episode to someone. Make sure that you, on the other hand, click subscribe and to make sure to follow us and talk with us and engage with us, because we want to deep dive in other things that could be of interest in making the switch together with you. Thank you for today. Take care of yourself. And if you can,
have fun.
Someone else.